Did intuitive machines skip a pre-flight check that could have avoided the spacecraft tipping over after landing? This is a really complicated thing people are talking about today, so let's dive in. But first, let's take a look at the new photos from Odysseus. It's interesting to note that once again, these photos are from the descent phase, while Odysseus was flying low over the moon, looking for a landing site. We haven't actually seen any photos from the lander on the moon's surface. I discussed yesterday that I think these photos are coming so slowly because of bandwidth issues. But also, it is interesting if you look at the language that intuitive machines used in their latest post on the service formerly known as Twitter. The fact that company is capitalized here and the use of the word furtherance makes me think that the lawyers are now writing or severely editing the releases. Perhaps because Intuitive Machines' stock price has not been doing well after the news about both the lander being sideways on Friday and the communications issues we learned about yesterday. At this point, I have to wonder if they have lunar surface photos and are hesitant to release them. They might look terrible because the lander fell over. But we did get some good news. Odysseus might have 10 to 20 extra hours of communication. Yesterday, Intuitive Machines told us that they thought that we would lose communication ability with the lander this morning. So that probably means more time to download photos and data. Hopefully we'll get more photos sometime soon. But moving on, let's talk about exactly what went wrong with the laser rangefinders, the pre-flight checks that were skipped, and some larger context. An excellent Reuters article by reporters Steve Gorman and Joey Roulette, the link is down below, I highly recommend you read this article, reveals that Intuitive Machines' decision to skip a test fire of the laser system is what led to the failure of the laser rangefinders and the last-minute decision to switch to NASA's LiDAR. And it's possible, though not definite, that's what led to the lander's sideways tumble. I want to dive into this because it is really complicated. Let's start with what happened exactly with the laser rangefinders. These laser rangefinders aboard the Nova C lander are crucial to landing successfully. The system is designed to measure the spacecraft's altitude off the moon's surface and the forward speed it's traveling at. So, pretty important when you're trying to soft land a spacecraft on the moon. But it was actually really lucky they found out about the laser rangefinder system when they did. According to Steve Altemus, the CEO and co-founder of Intuitive Machines, way before descent, when the team realized the spacecraft was in an elliptical orbit and not circular, they decided to switch on the laser rangefinders early to find out how close to the surface they actually were. They just wanted some better measurements. But the lasers didn't fire. Thankfully, NASA had a LiDAR navigation system aboard the spacecraft that was there to be tested on the lunar surface. But here's the thing. The fact that they decided to fire the rangefinders early was fortuitous because if they hadn't, the issue would have become clear during the descent phase. There would have been no time to do anything. The spacecraft would have crashed. The Intuitive Machines team rewrote the navigation application software to use NASA's system for navigation and guidance and uploaded it to the vehicle. When they did that, it actually stopped Odysseus's navigation, guidance, and control, which is why it's good that they did it during that extra orbit of the moon that delayed the landing time on Thursday. But they were able to reboot the system and the patch worked. But this leads to the question of why the laser rangefinder system wasn't working. I'll let Steve Altemus, CEO and co-founder of Intuitive Machines, explain why in his own words. This video is from the press conference on Friday.
And we saw that that laser didn't fire. And what we found was that there's a safety enable switch because it's not an eye-safe laser. That safety enable switch is in the box and was not disabled. So it's like having a safety on a firearm. It's for ground processing, and that was an oversight on our part. And so those laser range finders could not be turned on, and we couldn't manipulate that enable switch or disable switch with the software. And so those rangefinders had been tested and would have worked if we'd had caught that oversight and removed that enable before or disable before flight.
The bottom line is that this was human error. Someone forgot to disable the safety switches before launch. Human error certainly happens in every area, including building spacecraft. But Mike Hansen, the head of navigation systems at Intuitive Machines, told Joey Roulette and Steve Gorman for this Reuters article that Intuitive Machines missed the safety switch issue because they opted to skip a pre-flight check that would have test-fired the laser rangefinder system. If they'd done it, they would have found the problem and corrected it. And the reason they skipped it? To save both time and money. They took a risk and probably underestimated how hard spaceflight actually is, and they lost. Intuitive Machines has 2 lunar landings left on this contract, and I'm guessing they won't skip those checks next time. The question is whether the loss of the laser rangefinder system led to Odysseus tipping over. This is a complicated question, and right now, Intuitive Machines doesn't have an answer according to that Reuters article. Again, link down below. Mike Hansen said it could very well have, but it also might not have made a difference. In terms of what happened to the lander specifically, it came down faster than expected at 6 meters per second, or roughly 13.5 miles per hour, instead of 1 meter per second, or about 2 miles per hour that was planned. It also had a horizontal velocity of 1 meter per second, or about 2 miles per hour, instead of 0. What they think happened is that the lander did come down vertically, but got its foot caught on a rock or in a crevice. It's unclear whether the fall fractured part of the landing gear. It is possible, but they do think Odysseus is a bit elevated and not flat on the lunar surface, maybe laying on a rock, based on the telemetry. The NASA system, called Navigation Doppler LiDAR for precise velocity and range sensing, uses light to measure speed, direction, and altitude. It operates on the same principles as radar with high accuracy, and is specifically designed to help spacecraft soft land on the moon. It also seems that Odysseus did have its terrain relative navigation camera, given that this image they released is from that camera, and the hazard detection and avoidance system was working. So it's hard to say whether any deficiencies of the NASA system, which I'm not trying to trash talk NASA's LiDAR system, it just wasn't designed for this specific spacecraft and mission, whether that contributed to the lander's fall. And then just for some larger context, I've seen a lot of comments saying that skipping pre-flight checks to save time and money, as well as the human error that went into this, is a problem with private spaceflight specifically. I absolutely agree private spaceflight has a lot of issues. But also, NASA absolutely has issues with human error. I point at the loss of Apollo 1, Challenger, and Columbia. More recently, NASA chose not to do a complete wet dress rehearsal, which fully loads the launch vehicle with propellant and takes the launch countdown to T-minus 9 seconds on the Artemis 1 mission because of schedule and money. They decided in the end not to fully load propellant into the ICPS, or second stage of SLS, during the modified WDR. And the launch was a bit of a mess as a result of cutting that test short. Does anyone else remember a team going to the launch pad to tighten bolts because of a fuel leak during tanking for the Artemis 1 launch countdown back in 2022?
The Red Crew operates out of a building about 4 miles away from the launch pad. Discussion is around torquing down the packing nuts at the base of the ML. The leak has increased.
This is a trade-off that gets made with something as complex as spaceflight. I'm not saying it's a good thing, and I am not defending Intuitive Machines here. This was a pretty bad screw-up that could have been devastating if NASA hadn't fortuitously had the LiDAR system aboard. But I think the blanket statement that private spaceflight is worse than NASA, specifically because of human error and judgment calls on time and money, is just not accurate. Spaceflight is hard, and this was a really dumb mistake, but hopefully Intuitive Machines will learn from this experience and do better. I will be back with more news as it comes in, but that's about all I have to say on this. Thank you for watching. I'm Swapna Krishna, and this is Ad Astra.